What this mare gave birth to left everyone speechless. The miracle of birth is something a horse breeder never tires of witnessing. But what happened one April morning in 2024 changed everything John and Sarah Mitchell thought they knew about horses. Their farm, sprawling across 300 acres of rolling countryside, had been their life's work since 2000. It was home to 300 horses, each one known by John's experienced eye. He could spot a sick horse clear across a field, predict foaling dates with uncanny accuracy, and over the years he had delivered hundreds of foals. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for April 19th. That morning brought a late, unexpected snowstorm. In the stable, John noticed something unusual about his temperamental 8-year-old mare. A crossbreed with such a difficult personality that the staff called her the unmanageable one. But she had one remarkable trait. 3 times before, she had given birth to twins, which occurs in less than 1% of cases. "I have a feeling about that old grump," John said to Sarah over a cup of coffee, watching the snow pile up against the windows. "She looks heavier than usual." "Betting again?" Sarah laughed. "Last time you were so sure of yourself you had to clean the stalls for a whole month." John's eyes sparkled with mischief. "I'll bet I'll repair 10 kilometers of fence. I bet she's carrying more than one foal." "For someone betting on a nameless horse, you're awfully confident," Sarah said, but she shook his hand anyway. "Deal, but if I win, you're fixing that fence in the spring mud." At precisely 10 a.m., bundled against the blizzard, Sarah set out on her usual rounds. The wind howled across the fields, and she wanted to make sure all the expectant mothers were warm and safe. What she discovered at the far end of the enclosure made her freeze in place. "John!" she screamed across the entire yard, her voice barely audible through the wind. "John, get out here right now!" John dropped his coffee cup and ran outside, his heart pounding. He found Sarah standing motionless in the snow, staring at an incredible scene. There, huddled against their mare, were 2 tiny foals. They were clearly premature, weighing perhaps 55 pounds each instead of the usual 66. Their small bodies steamed in the cold air, and their wet coats were already catching snowflakes. "They're so small," Sarah whispered, her voice full of worry. "John, they'll freeze to death out here." "Get the cart," John said urgently. "We need to move them to the heated stable immediately." While Sarah ran toward the equipment shed, John knelt beside the mare. She looked exhausted but attentive, sniffing her babies with obvious tenderness. "Well, old girl," he murmured softly, "today you really earned yourself a name." When Sarah returned with the cart 15 minutes later, she found John bent not over 2 foals, but over 3. "There's another one," she gasped, pointing at the newcomer. A third tiny filly, the exact copy of her sister's, was trying to stand on her trembling legs. John examined the third foal carefully, checking her breathing and responses. "She's weak but alive," he announced. 3 foals! I can't believe it!" They quickly loaded the 3 babies onto the cart, wrapping them in every blanket they could find. "Looks like we both lost our bet," Sophie said breathlessly as they hurried toward the stable. 3 foals means nobody won." John was about to agree, but something made him stop dead. He looked at the mare, still lying in the snow, her flanks heaving heavily from exhaustion. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. "She's still pushing." They placed the 3 foals under heat lamps in the stable, and John returned to fetch their mother. What he found there would haunt his dreams and fill his heart for the rest of his life. A 4th foal lay in the snow beside the mare, tiny but very much alive. "Sarah!" he cried, his voice broken with emotion. "There's a 4th!" When Sarah ran out, she saw John kneeling in the snow, holding in his arms a fourth little filly, exactly like the others. 4 foals. 4 living, breathing, moving miracles. The statistical improbability of what they were witnessing hit them like a physical blow. 1 in 11.2 million. Those were the odds that 4 foals would be born alive from a single mare. "We need help," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We need help now." Their 3 children, 16-year-old Nathan, 13-year-old Claire, and 12-year-old Emma, came running from the house when they heard the commotion. "Mom, what's happening?" Claire cried, but she froze when she saw the 4th foal in her father's arms. "Kids, listen carefully," Sarah said, taking control of the situation. "Nathan, call Dr. Anderson and tell him we have an emergency. Claire, bring all the hot water bottles from the house. Emma, boil water and prepare warm bottles, quickly." The next few hours transformed into a desperate fight for survival. Dr. Anderson arrived in less than an hour, his truck sliding on the icy roads. "In 30 years of practice," he said, methodically examining each foal, "I've never seen 4 living foals from a single birth." The smallest foal, the 4th one, was hypothermic and struggling to breathe. "We might lose this one," Dr. Anderson warned grimly. "Her body temperature is dangerously low." "No," John said fiercely, "we're not losing any of them." They named the mare Wonder because she truly had become something special. The foals were harder to name. They were so similar that the children decided to use colored markers to distinguish them, which led to the names Red, Green, Blue, and Violet. The first week blended into 2-hour feeding schedules and constant monitoring. John and Sarah took turns around the clock, never leaving the foals alone for a minute. Violet, the smallest, demanded the most attention, but proved to be a real fighter with an iron will. Rumors of the miracle spread throughout the community. Neighbors arrived with supplies and offers of help. Press teams arrived on the 3rd day. By the 5th day, the story had gone international. "The miracle birth," screamed the headlines. "A 1 in millions birth that defies all laws of nature." The turning point came on the 12th day. But first, they had to survive a night that nearly destroyed everything. It was 2:17 a.m. on April 20th when John's world collapsed. He was making his routine rounds, moving quietly through the heated stable, lighting his way only with a flashlight. The wind outside still howled from the storm, shaking the doors and making the entire structure creak ominously. 3 of the foals were huddled under the heat lamps, their small bodies rising and falling with their breathing. But Violet, the smallest, the fighter, was lying motionless on her side. "No, no, no," John whispered, kneeling beside her. He pressed his ear to her tiny chest and felt his heart stop. Nothing. No heartbeat, no breathing. "Sarah!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the stable, piercing through the storm. "Sarah, get here right now!" Without hesitation, John took the lifeless foal in his arms and began compressions on her tiny chest, just as he'd seen Dr. Anderson do with newborns. He breathed into her nostrils. Her body was cold, too cold, and completely limp. Sarah arrived in her pajamas and bare feet, sliding on the wet floor. "What's happening?" she asked breathlessly. But the sight of John resuscitating Violet told her everything. "Is she?" "I don't know," John said through gritted teeth, not stopping the compressions. "She's not breathing. Her heart stopped." He tilted the foal's head back again and blew into her nostrils, desperately searching for any sign of life. "How long?" Sarah asked, grabbing towels and hot water bottles. "I don't know. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe more." John's voice was breaking. "I should have checked earlier. I should have—" "Enough," Sarah said with sudden fury. "Keep going. Don't stop." For 20 agonizing minutes, John worked on Violet's lifeless body. Compressions, mouth to mouth, warming, compressions again. His hands trembled with exhaustion and fear. Sarah held the hot water bottles just above the foal while tears streamed down her face. "John," she finally whispered, "maybe we should—" "No!" he cried. "She doesn't give up, and I won't give up either." That's when it happened. A barely audible breath, almost imperceptible. Then another. Violet's eyelids fluttered, and she let out the weakest cry he'd ever heard. "She's back," John sobbed, collapsing over the little foal. "She's back." But their relief was short-lived. Violet's breathing remained labored and irregular, and her temperature stayed dangerously low despite all their efforts. "We need Dr. Anderson," Sarah said, already reaching for the phone. "She needs oxygen. She needs help we can't give her." "It's 3 in the morning, in the middle of a snowstorm," John said desperately. "He'll never make it here in this weather." "Then we're taking her to him," Sarah replied with fierce determination. What followed was the most terrifying drive of their lives. With Violet wrapped in heated blankets and placed on John's lap in the passenger seat, Sarah drove the truck through blinding snow and icy roads. The foal's breathing was so shallow it was barely perceptible. Twice during the 30-minute journey, John thought he'd lost her again. "Hold on, little one," he murmured again and again, rubbing her chest and keeping her warm. "You're a fighter. You don't give up. We don't give up." Dr. Anderson met them at his emergency clinic, having braved the storm himself after Sarah's frantic call. "Severe hypothermia and oxygen deprivation," he diagnosed, immediately hooking Violet up to a small oxygen tank. "A few more minutes and we would have lost her for good." They spent the next 4 hours at the clinic, taking turns holding Violet under heat lamps while Dr. Anderson monitored her vital signs. Slowly, painfully, her breathing became more regular. Her body temperature returned to normal. Her eyes began to focus and follow movements. "She's going to make it," Dr. Anderson finally announced at dawn. But it was close. Another 5 minutes and her brain would have suffered irreversible damage from lack of oxygen. By the time they returned to the stable, the 3 other foals were frantically searching for their missing sister. When they brought Violet back into the stable, still weak but breathing calmly, the reunion was nothing short of miraculous. The 3 sisters immediately surrounded her, sniffing and protecting her as if they knew exactly what she'd been through. "That's when I knew," John said later, watching the 4 foals huddled together. "That's when I knew they would all survive. They're not just sisters, they're a team, and a team never abandons its members." The crisis of that first night bonded the Mitchell family to their 4 foals in a way that couldn't have happened under normal breeding circumstances. They had fought death together and won. From that moment on, Violet and none of them were simply animals anymore. They had become family. But surviving the first night was only the beginning. The following 7 days melted into an uninterrupted succession of 2-hour temperature checks and desperate bottle feedings. Wonder wouldn't accept all her daughters equally. She pushed away Blue and Violet, preferring the 2 stronger foals. The turning point came on the 5th day, when Green interposed herself between Violet and the aggressive Red, protecting her smallest sister. "They're learning to work together," Sarah noted, amazed. The temperature readings finally stabilized. Not only had they survived, but they had become a real family with their own alliances and an unbreakable bond. Dr. Anderson's final visit took place 6 weeks later.
"I'm documenting this case for veterinary journals," he announced. "Such a survival rate defies every statistical model we have."
The 4 foals hadn't just survived. They were thriving, each having developed her own unique personality despite their identical appearance. Equine breeding researchers studied the genetic factors behind this unprecedented birth. Television crews came every week to film the famous quadruplets. When spring arrived, Wonder proudly led her 4 daughters to pasture. The other horses seemed initially puzzled by the 4 identical foals, but quickly accepted them. "You know what's best?" Sarah said, watching the foals play in the green grass. "We both lost that bet about the fence, but we got something infinitely more precious." John nodded, hugging his wife. "A grumpy, nameless mare became Wonder and changed our lives forever." The story spread around the world, drawing visitors from 6 continents to their farm. They became symbols of hope for breeding communities everywhere. But for John and Sarah, they remained what they had always been: a miracle that began with a snowstorm and a bet about a fence, and ended with proof that sometimes the impossible becomes wonderfully, magnificently real. Never give up when it matters. That's what 4 tiny miracles taught one family on a snowy April morning, and that's a lesson that will echo through their lives forever. Did you love this incredible story? If you had found that tiny, lifeless foal in the middle of the night, would you have tried to revive her for 20 minutes, or would you have given up sooner? Tell us in the comments below. If this miracle touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us share more amazing true stories like this one. Remember, never give up when it really matters. Thank you so much for reading. See you in the next story.